Now, was that easier to just focus on one character and one setting than it was to do these multiple settings that you're doing in Neat Stuff?
Yes, yes. Well, and it was, and for two reasons. One is because I was inspired. I had a lot of ideas for this character, especially since he was semi autobiographical. I was more or less writing about myself, or a much younger version of myself. But and also it helped that the audience responded. I had this hunch. I had this hunch that this would do well. People would like it. And that hunch proved to be correct. It was commercially successful. So it was a win win.
So, as you mentioned, around the time that you started doing Hate, independent and underground comics started being referred to as alternative comics. And coincidentally, you also had alternative music springing up as well as alternative comedy. And there's been an effort to um, uh, somehow conflate what you're doing with Hate with what was happening musically in Seattle at the time. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, there was a very much both me and a lot of my cartooning peers, we would do a lot of record covers for these alternative labels. So there was very much of a tie-in, and a lot of the where our alternative comics would sell. Usually, where we sold the best was in these alternative record stores. We sold way more comics in these independent record stores than we did in comic shops. Most regular comic shops wanted nothing to do with comics like mine. They liked superheroes. They were idiots and they liked superheroes. And they didn't understand our comics. They hated our comics. So we did much better being sold through record stores, these indie record stores. So the indie record stores became this one-stop shop for anybody who wanted something different. If you were looking for something different, it didn't matter what kind of music, uh, art, movies, you'd usually find it in these indie places. So it wasn't surprising too that later on they tended to be younger than me, but there was this huge wave of alternative or indie comedians, and they immediately were drawn to cartoonists like myself. And I still am friends with friendly acquaintances with a lot of these. They're not young anymore, but all of these at the time young, different, up and coming comedians.
So, as much as Buddy Bradley and the cast of Hate is kind of associated with the grunge movement and what was happening in Seattle at the time, one of the things that strikes me about Hate is there's a timeless quality to it where certain aspects of it I feel are resonant today with people I know who are music nerds or music collectors. Uh, like those are archetypes in a sense that I don't know if they're tied to any specific era. It feels like
Yeah,
over the past 40 years, you've always had these kind of characters.
yeah, yeah. No, it's people really don't change. Technology changes. That's the biggest change. And technology has an effect on how we interact, but people are still the same. We still all need to eat shit and fuck to be to sound. I don't mean to be that crude, but it's true. It's like at the base, it's like it's still that's still the truth. And so, in that sense, there's no reason why that somebody wouldn't relate to, like, for example, if you're if you're a straight white guy in his 20s or just a straight guy in his 20s, why wouldn't you relate to Buddy Bradley? Because that's you, and it hasn't changed that much.
I mean, just one example that I saw recently, when Buddy and another character are going through records. I mean, first of all, records, vinyl records. I mean, in the past uh, 10, 15 years, there's been a resurgence in popularity of vinyl, and kind of a condescension towards CDs, which I found to be particularly funny, just because it feels like, everything goes in these like 15-year cycles.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Nostalgia is always 15 years.
um, but also like, I could take any of those characters, and I don't know necessarily what they would have been uh, working as back then, but like nowadays, like I feel like my friends who are working as developers, or something in that field, would very much be like a Buddy Bradley now, kind of disaffected, and a lot of like intelligence that they don't know how to use in a productive way.
Right. Right. Yeah. They're not. Buddy Bradley wasn't overtly intelligent. He was a bad student. He wasn't focused in a way that would make his parents proud. And that was me. That was totally me. It's like I never did anything that my father would have recommended. Um, but yeah, he's just somebody that has this. He doesn't know what to do with it, but there is this certain innate intelligence, and you just have to find a way. When you're young, you gotta make a lot of mistakes and just figure it out. And again, before, it was like when I was just saying, especially if you're a straight guy, but even when I was doing hate, um, a lot of what female readers would write to me and say, I really relate to hate. And I was like, oh, one of the female characters, go, no, Buddy. I relate to Buddy. That's me. I totally relate to him, which is that floundering. You relate to that floundering, you know?